We are here today at the Spanish Military Hospital Museum in St. Augustine, Florida, and I have with me one of the wonderful docents, Kim, and she's going to tell us about this location, what happens in it. Tell me about this particular building, though.
All right, this building is just one of 3 buildings that made up the hospital complex. This was Hospital East, the recuperation building. Now across the street, we had Hospital West, the surgical building. It was the largest of the 3. Unfortunately, we can't show you that one. It burned down in 1818. Now this one burned down also in 1885, but it was rebuilt. Actually, only 2/3 of it, because the building next door was already a historical building. They wouldn't let us tear it down. But it is the original foundation. Now the hospital was actually called the Royal Hospital of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And it was here from 1784 to 1821. This was still pre-germ theory, so they were working on the Galenic theory of the 4 humors of the body. This was developed by 3 Greeks, Galen, Aristotle, and Hippocrates, the father of medicine. Basically, they thought that our health was governed by those 4 fluids: phlegm, black bile, yellow bile, and of course blood. So if you were ill, they thought you had either too much or not enough of one of them. If somebody was feverish and grumpy, they thought they had too much blood, so they would do a bloodletting. And of course that person did quickly become calm. We all do when you take out a bunch of blood. If they thought you didn't have enough of a fluid, that wasn't too bad for you, because they would use diet to make you healthy again. And the Spanish were big believers in a healthy diet. That's why the patients at this hospital, they ate very well. Yes, in fact, the average diet had a base daily ration of chicken, beef, pork lard, bacon, bread, chickpeas, and the seasonal fresh fruits and vegetables.
Doesn't sound that bad to me.
No, today we call that the ketogenic diet, my favorite. Now the time period, 1784 to 1821, even though it was pre-germ theory, the Spanish were very medically advanced. In fact, they were the most advanced in all of Europe and England. This is because they were influenced very early on by the Moors. The Moors had occupied Spain for over 700 years. During this time, they were advanced in all the sciences and mathematics. They had saved the teachings of the Greeks, the Romans, and the Egyptians. Now the Moors were Islamic, and so they were very holy, and according to their religion, it is unholy to be dirty. So they were hygienic. This included washing their hands and their medical tools.
They washed their medical tools?
Yes, they washed them in vinegar water,
Wow.
which today we know kills germs. They didn't know about them, but they were killing them. In 1492, Spain told the Moors they had to go, but maintained those medical practices and grew them. And in 1563, they were the very first country to require a formal education and a license to be a physician.
You have to actually know what you're doing to be a doctor?
Well, in Spain anyway, not here necessarily. Now, they required 8 years of university, followed by 2 years of residency. Yes, sound familiar?
Yeah.
Yes. Now, this is where we get ours from, but the Spanish took it a step further. Once you had your license, you were required to undergo a competency hearing every 5 years. This was to make sure you were maintaining that knowledge. Here in America, though, we did not have any requirements of any kind till 1910. Before then, anybody who wanted to be a doctor could hang up his shingle and start practicing, which is probably why the average American hospital during this period only had a 30 to 35% survival rate.
What about this one?
This one, 70 to 75%, very close to the hospitals of today. And we do think it is because of the good hygiene, the diet, and of course that education.
That's amazing.
I'm ready to start surgery if you are. They were very medically advanced, but there was one thing they didn't know how to do, and that's fix broken bones. Yes, a simple break that you don't fix it. You just immobilize it and it heals itself. But if somebody had a compound fracture or shattered bones, Those just don't heal themselves, and they did not have the skills we have today. They did know, however, what was going to happen to that patient if they didn't amputate. He was going to lose the use of that limb.
Well,
he was going to be in great pain.
He was going to die.
And that's
gangrene.
right. That's what was going to happen next. Yes. So this was a life-saving surgery. Unfortunately, it was also pre-anesthesia. We did not discover the anesthetic effect of ether till 1846. But it wasn't a problem at this hospital. Those patients didn't suffer much at all because here they used a couple of herbs and laudanum to make him quite comfortable.
Okay.
Now they added the herbs because this gave them a patient who was not only highly euphoric, but calm, sedate, and drowsy. They would doze in and out of sleep during the surgery. The physicians knew that even though he was quite comfortable, he was still conscious. That meant pain could still send him into shock and kill him. So in addition to being skilled, they were fast. They could do an arm amputation in 3 to 4 minutes, a leg amputation in 4 to 6 minutes. Pretty good, huh?
So show me the saw here.
Okay, well this is our bone saw. It's really just a hacksaw. And they could use this saw and cut through both bones in only 30 to 60 seconds. Now, there were a couple of things they had to do before they could get to that cutting. The first thing they're going to have to do, of course, is make him comfortable. I almost forgot that. Then they applied the petite screw tourniquet. It was invented in 1710 by a Frenchman, Jean-Louis Petit. And actually, it was the first one to completely cut off the circulation, and we still use this same design today more than 300 years later. Now, once that was on, he would grab his capital knife. Now, you'll notice that it's uniquely shaped, and they designed it for a specialized cut called the single flap angled incision, the first of its kind. Now, how it worked, the surgeon would start as far below the cutting area as he could, then he would cut up on an angle as high as he could. He came across and then reversed that angle. Now this gave him a nice flap of muscle, fat, and skin that was separated from the bone, except the muscles. They're still attached to the bones by tendons. So he grabs his Catlin blade. He gets it underneath the muscle and then runs it right down those bones. This severs the tendons and frees that flap. So he grabs a leather strap, peels the flap back, and then ties it down safely away from the cutting area so nothing will happen to it. And of course he cuts.
Off with the saw.
Off with the saw. Now he's cut off those shattered bones, but he's also cut arteries, veins, and capillaries. Yes. So
big problem. Yep.
Yes, he's going to quickly grab his tuniculum. Then he reached down between the bones, gently pulled up those cut arteries, then quickly tied them closed with a strong silk ligature. And this is similar to how we still do it in amputations today. Then he reaches into the fireplace and grabs a cottering iron. He used that red hot tip to run across the cut and seal the veins and capillaries shut. The next thing he did was pack in a Linton mixture. Now this was just ground cotton and flour, but it did the same 3 things the hemostatic Linton does in surgery today. It absorbed excess fluids, coagulated the blood, and promoted proper drainage. Unlike the hemostatic Linton, he did not have to remove it. It was all natural, so it would get absorbed by the body after it was broken up. Now once he's done that, he quickly removes the leather strap and he puts that flap of muscle, fat, and skin right back where it was. But thanks to that special cut, he's got more flap than arm. So he folds it over on top of the cut bones to protect and cushion them. Now once he's done that, he's got to sew it back together, right?
Yeah.
But here's the problem. They didn't like to sew. See, they practiced something that is still practiced in medicine today, evidence-based care. They would write down everything they did. If something was working, they continued. If not, they quickly stopped. Well, they had noticed something. There was a much higher incidence of infection during recovery when they sewed. So instead, he's going to super glue it.
That's amazing.
No, they didn't have super
They
glue
didn't have the
back
super
then.
glue.
But they did have isinglass.
Okay.
Now, isinglass is the purified air bladders of fish. It's very sticky, almost as sticky as super glue. They would take the isinglass, put it in a bowl, then they took their bandages, dipped them in it, and then wrapped them nice and snugly all the way around. That glued everything right back into place. And when they did that, the surgery was over. Okay, now we're gonna do my favorite, the guillotine amputation.
Sounds like fun.
Well, it was fun for the surgeon. I don't know how fun it was for the soldier.
Okay.
Now, he would use this one when his patient only had an infected finger or toe. This made it possible to just take that digit. Now, what he would do is place that digit on a block of steel called a medical anvil. He put the digit on the block of steel, then he picked up his osteotome. Now, it's just a curved chisel. It was razor sharp on the bottom. But don't worry, mine's not. Now, he would place it over that very last knuckle, and then the orderly over there would drop something. He'd make a big noise. When that patient turned his head to look, off that puppy came. Then he would reach into the fireplace and grab his flat cottering iron. He cauterized that knuckle, he packed in some Linton mixture, wrapped a bandage around it, and he was done.
Seconds later.
Seconds later, yes. Now, they did not get a nice soft bed for this one. It was considered outpatient surgery, and they sent him straight home.
Sure, off you go.
Okay, now the next one up is bullet removal. Now, the good news is they just had little round balls of lead for their bullets. They did not penetrate as deeply or do quite as much damage. But they also didn't have x-ray machines or decent lighting. Now, the surgeons here, they relied on their tools to find the bullet and get it out. The first one he always used, his finger. If he felt that bullet, he pulled it out. Now, this was the second tool he would use. It is his probe, a metal stick, and the tip was coated in porcelain. That's because when lead touches porcelain, it always leaves a mark. So he would stick it in and wiggle it around, hoping to find the bullet. He would know because when he hit something hard and pulled it out, there's going to be a mark there. Yes. Now, once that was done, he grabbed his concave forceps. Now, these are cool. See how they're indented?
Sure.
He would stick them in, wrap them around that bullet, get a good tight grip. Now, once it was out, they would pour vinegar water in. They knew that along with the bullet had gone pieces of his clothing, dust, dirt, maybe even a leaf or a twig. They were hygienic, so they flushed it. And that helped them to keep infection out because vinegar water kills germs. All right, let's see. The next one is the trepanation. Now, this one was used when somebody had injured their head and was exhibiting symptoms: nausea, disorientation, lack of balance, and unequal dilation of their pupils. They knew what this meant. Do you know what it means?
There's pressure on your brain? No.
Yes, very good. Perfect. Yes, they knew that fluid was building up and making pressure. Now, in order to relieve that pressure, you have to drill.
Yeah, you got to drill a hole in your head.
Yes.
Of course.
Now, I know what you're thinking, that this was very painful, but it wasn't. That's because while we have billions of nerves everywhere else in our body, we don't have any in our skull.
Amazing.
So you could drill all day long, he's not going to feel a thing.
Once you've got a hole in your head.
Yeah, they've relieved the pressure, but he does have the hole in his head. Now, the Spanish, they would use a silver coin to fold it, to close it up.
Sure.
That's because they used it for two reasons. The first is silver was their #1 export, so this was cheap and readily available.
Right.
Second, evidence-based care. They noticed very little, mostly no infection when they used it. Today we know why. It's antimicrobial. Here comes the fascinating part. Before they put it on, they drilled small holes all the way around it. Then over the next few months, the soldier's skull would grow bone right through those holes, making this a permanent part of his head.
That is amazing.
Isn't it? And we still do that today as well.
Wow.
Alrighty, now during this time, we already know they didn't know about germs yet, but they did know something was spreading disease. They didn't know it was germs, but they thought it was miasmas, noxious gases or odors in the air. So, to prevent that spread of disease, they did 3 things. They kept the windows open during the day to let fresh air in. They kept plenty of space between their beds. Check it out. Social distancing.
Amazing.
And finally, each room would burn their escafeta 3 times a day. The escafeta is a cast iron bowl with a bed of sand in the bottom. To it, they added burning hot coals from the fireplace and lavender, believing it would smoke the miasmas away. Now, it didn't do that because there's no such thing as miasmas. There were people who thought about germs. They just got laughed out of the business every time they tried to bring it up.
Exactly.
Especially hand washing. I mean, what the heck?
Yeah,
Who needs to wash their hands?
Right. A little dirt doesn't hurt anybody.
That's right. Now, when they burned their escafeta, they noticed something. Their patients always became much calmer. And today we know why. Lavender is a calming aromatherapy. Now, they didn't know it, but it was preventing the spread of disease. That's because when you burn lavender or sage or rosemary, they give off carbolic acid, and it destroys viruses and bacteria right in the air. A little fun fact, the very first doctor who used killed germs during surgeries, Lister, the Scot, and he used carbolic acid.
Wow.
The same acid that they were using here, they just didn't know it.
So we're in the recovery ward. Is that what we've got here?
That's what we've got here. Now, there was some special things that they did with their beds. First of all, you're going to be surprised, but they were soft. That's because they stuffed those mattresses with Spanish moss.
This?
Yes.
It doesn't look like Spanish moss. It looks like somebody's hair or something.
That's because they would boil it first to kill the bugs that like to live in it. We call them chiggers.
I didn't know chiggers lived in Spanish moss.
Yes, that's where they like to live.
That
I
would
know.
be bad.
Every summer, I made forts, and every summer I got chiggers because I used that Spanish moss to stuff my bed.
Terrible.
Yes,
so
they are.
yeah, you definitely want to get rid of them. So it's it's nice and spongy and soft. And
it is very soft.
You fill this tick up.
You could just fill it up.
Yeah.
Now the other thing about it was free. They just had to pull it out of the trees and boil it, which was very handy because of their hygiene. Every time they discharged a patient, they burned all his moss, laundered the outer covering, then restuffed it with fresh, clean moss for their next patient. So not only was that bed soft, it was hygienic as well. When a patient was given a bed, he was also given clothing, linens, and utensils that had the same number. This way, when they were taken out to be cleaned, they were brought back to the same patient, thus preventing cross-contamination. Now the final bed is that one over there.
Okay.
You'll notice there's a hole in the middle.
What's going on with that?
Well, underneath that is a chamber pot.
Okay.
This was for leg amputees or any other patient who was too ill to go outside and use the latrine.
Okay.
That was the invalid bed. Today we call it the bedpan.
Yeah. And they have separate
Yes,
ways
they
to...
would. Well, we just did this to separate the two. This would have been done in the isolation ward. And also because of those beds, to give that person privacy. Yeah.
It's amazingly modern in all these conveniences. You do some reading in other medical situations, other cultures, and it doesn't seem like it's anything close to this level.
None of them were doing any of this. There was no cleansing, there was no hygiene, and that's probably why they had such a high survival rate here.
What about you mentioned the idea of the priest coming along. Who are the people who are actually taking care of these folks, the orderlies?
These are the orderlies. Now, everybody in here would have been in the military. It was a military hospital. It would have been all men. I am an anomaly. I would not have been here because, first of all, it's military, and second, these are Catholics. It was completely unseemly for a woman to see a man in his underclothes, and vice versa.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kim, for your amazing quantity of information. It feels like I could ask any question about, Spanish military hospital, and you're going to have the answer to it. So thank you so much for that. If you're ever in the St. Augustine, Florida area and you want a wonderful experience learning about medicine in the 18th century, come to this spot. You will get the information you want. Again, thank you, Kim. It's amazing. And thank you for coming along on this amazing medical journey as we discover what it's like and actually walk in the footsteps of people in the 18th century. They were in this very building more than 200 years ago. So thank you so much for coming and have a great day.